everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today at RG Podcast. Respect, humility, empathy. Those are the three values we constantly stress every single episode as we strive to be more respectful in our conversations, more empathetic, trying to relate with the other person, and showing some humility, fully acknowledging that we don't have all the answers to all the questions. So that being said, I'm being joined today with the Byrce is wrong. Is that your name?
For the purposes of this discussion, we can go with that if that makes you feel more comfortable.
No, I love your little logo, but I think you might run into some trademark issues. I think it's hilarious.
We were very careful in constructing it so that the font was as similar as it could be, but we believe that we changed just enough things to, for example, we rotated the background on its side. And so there's a few things that we've done to kind of avoid the copyright issue. But the bottom line is we're not big enough or noticeable enough yet for the Price is Right to even know or care that we exist.
I got a funny story to tell you about my grandmother. She had a crush on Bob Barker. And I want to tell a little story. Yeah, she thought he was handsome. Hilarious.
That's fine. I'm sure he may have been at one point, and is, depending on how old your grandmother is, I'm sure back in the day he looked very different than he does when we were watching him.
She was pretty old. Actually, I want to tell you a quick story about her, just because we try to give some biographical information about ourselves, to try to relate to each other. That's the whole purpose of empathy, that to recognize we're human beings at the end of the day, and we may disagree about some stuff, but actually, first and foremost, I want to ask you a few questions. One, where are you calling out of?
I'm in California.
Oh, Cali.
Yeah, northern California.
And are you Caribbean?
I am not.
Krill?
No.
Just straight African American?
I'm multi-ethnic. I actually, it's funny you mentioned, I think you mentioned having a Jewish person on before we started. Yeah. I am like 39% Jewish, European Jewish.
You're kidding me.
So,
Ashkenazi.
Yes. Yeah. Ashkenazi. From Poland, the Poland / Germany area.
Well, I love your hair, man. If you could, if you ever decide to like share yourself or do the locks for life, I could use a couple inches here.
I don't know what to say about that. Hair is like one of those things that, and really all features, but people have been talking about my hair my whole life because they always want to know. That's kind of the thing that makes them question what my ethnicity is. And I'm like, I've always been told that I had good hair, but that depends on your perspective, because someone who has, long, straight blonde hair might think that I have horrible hair. But I've never liked the fixation on hair. I've never liked the expression good hair or bad hair. I mean, hair is hair.
Until you have no hair, right? Until you have no hair.
Bald is beautiful, and one day we may all get there. I've shaved my head before, and I used to be in the military, so actually.
Really? What branch?
But I was in the Air Force.
Really?
Yeah.
21
years.
You were, wait.
I'm retired.
So. You were in the Air Force? Oh my God. I thought you were like 25 years old. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, I get that a lot. I'm not 25. I'm actually, my birthday's coming up next week or about a week and a half.
And how old will you be?
43. So,
wow.
Yeah, wow. I'm older than I look.
Okay, so quick story about my grandmother. So I grew up Mexican on the east side of Bakersfield, California. You know Bakersfield?
Yep. Been there.
Well, all right. My condolences, but I really hated being Mexican growing up. Like I always visualized myself as being white and blonde hair, blue eyes. And I literally, my parents wouldn't speak Spanish to us. They both spoke Spanish, but they refused to teach us because they ironically thought it would be as a disadvantage. I mean, that's pretty much definition of irony at this point.
Yeah, I concur.
But anyway, right. But at this point, so growing up, it made me hate the sound of Spanish because it's like my parents, using this code language. But so are you familiar with the Day of the Dead?
The Day of
the Dead in May,
no.
I think. The Dia de los Muertos. It's where the
No,
Mexicans, they dress up like skeletons and they dance around.
I think I've
Yeah.
seen pictures of that. I didn't
Okay.
know that that was for a specific celebration, though.
So if you ever see the movie Coco, which is a cartoon, I generally, out of principle, don't watch cartoons. But
Same here.
yeah, but actually that one, it's about Day of the Dead and this little kid who plays the guitar. I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but my wife was about 3 months away from giving birth to our daughter, and my grandmother had died. My last grandmother had died maybe about 2 weeks before I went and saw that. So it had to do with generations and the grandparents. And man, it was like an extremely sad moment and an extremely jovial moment for me, because I got to, you know, experience that. And I want my daughter to, my mom's passed away, so she'll never meet my mother, but I do want her to experience that and to celebrate the dead, because I see the beauty of it now. I just saw people dressing like skeletons as a kid. And so now, I want my daughter's half Korean, so I want her to be in touch with the roots. So that being said, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about your deconversion process, about how you grew up or anything like that.
Sure. So basically, I'm originally from New York, right? So my family is Christian. I came from a Christian background. I would say that they're more on the liberal side of Christianity, and in my nuclear family particularly, I didn't really grow up, going to church regularly. Religion wasn't super important. It wasn't really this thing that was harped on. There was a belief in God and a belief in Jesus, and that's just kind of how I was taught. And my extended family members, they were, of course, much more religious. And like my grandmother was super religious. She's passed away now, but she was very religious. I have aunts and uncles who are very much more into it than my own parents. But yeah, I kind of grew up in that way and really never questioned the existence of God. It was just something I kind of always accepted because that was the way that I was raised, and that was the belief that everyone around me had as well. And so whenever I would ask questions that I didn't understand about the world, oftentimes the answer was, well, God has a plan, and this is kind of the way things are. And so it was just something I never really questioned, and but never really took it so seriously that I was like super devout. And I did pray. I believed in prayer every night, and it was more of a ritualistic thing. And then when I got around like 19, 20 years old, right around the time when I joined the military, I started getting a little bit more religious because I feel like culturally, the U.S. military is very religious, at least it was at that time. And especially right around the start of the war, when I came in, it was peacetime, but then 9/11 happened like a couple of years after. And so then it seemed like religion was all over the place. And so I started encountering people who were much more devout in faith than I was. And I also started meeting people of different religions too at the same time, and meeting atheists for the first time. Like, I didn't know that there was actually that many people who didn't believe in a God until I joined the military. So I thought that was weird. But the Christians in the military who were much more devout, those are kind of the ones that I like try to associate with or learn from. And it was difficult for me because they had what I would call extreme concepts that differed from my interpretation of Christianity. They were much more anti-gay and I don't want to say anti-women, but they had ideas about women, and they didn't really align necessarily with my views of Christianity. And so I was hesitant about that, but they still seemed much more devout than I did, and knew more about the Bible, marginally more than I did at that time. So I started getting more into the Bible and trying to get a little bit stronger into my faith. And so I would say that I was a stronger Christian throughout my 20s than earlier in my life. And my process of deconversion happened about 5 years ago, somewhere 2016, 2017 timeframe. This is when I'm getting toward the end of my military career. But it's not related to that at all. It was just, I I started questioning my beliefs after having experienced for so many years the different ideologies and different positions of people that I had met, and realizing that religion is different all over the world, and trying to figure out why I thought that I would have the correct one when so many other people have different God. I mean, even within Christianity, there's like a thousand different denominations, and everyone are making different claims about Jesus and everything. And I'm like, well, what makes me so sure that I have the right one? How can I compare mine to theirs to see which one is true? And then I realized there's really no empirical ways to do that. You know, much of this is based on faith, which was not satisfying to me, because that's still not knowing. You know, that's choosing to believe something, but that's the same thing that everyone else was doing. And so I wanted to be right. You know, I didn't want to be in this, well, what if I'm wrong stage, because that was just not satisfying to me. So I started investigating, learning a little bit more about philosophy, epistemology, science, reason, rationality, and just learning how to make good arguments, learning how to avoid logical fallacies. I was kind of a Christian apologist at this stage, at least online. I was in a lot of these, yeah, I used to be in these debate groups and these, you know, forums. I've been kicked out of them now because I made this. But at the time, I was a Christian apologist, and I would argue with atheists, really mostly trying to reaffirm my beliefs, but also trying to convince other people that my position was reasonable, and that atheism, or what I understood of atheism, didn't make any sense. But I kept being challenged by these atheists, who, a lot of them who knew the Bible more than I did, you know. And so it kind of, in order for me to have better arguments for God and Christianity, I had to know the Bible. So I had to start reading it more, and, you know, learning what it actually says so that I could defend it. But it became more and more difficult the more I was reading, because I was reading things that didn't make any sense to me, or that I didn't agree with, or that seemed contradictory. And so it was making me question my own beliefs more than it was allowing me to develop arguments to defend Christianity. And then I just started getting more and more desperate. And finally, I realized that the only thing I was doing was just trying to find ways to defend what I already believed. I wasn't really trying to learn what was true. I had already decided on what was true, and was trying to find arguments to defend them. And then I realized that that's incorrect. That's because, what if if my position is wrong, I shouldn't be trying to defend it. I should be first trying to learn whether my position is right, and whether I have good reasons to believe in what I do. And then I realized I actually didn't. And so, and that's when it all kind of came crashing down. So I wasn't ready to give up theism altogether, but I knew that I had a problem with Christianity, or at least the Bible, because I couldn't really defend it properly. So I'm like, well, so this, for a short period of time, it was like I was in that deistic phase. Okay, maybe the Bible's not true, but there's probably still a God. You know, I don't understand where everything came from if, you know, there's not a creator. Things appear to be designed. So I was looking at these arguments from design and just emotional reasons as well, having meaning and purpose. You know, what's the point of me being here? How does all this make sense if there's no God? And so that was what was keeping me in theism. And so then it was then when I started learning about critical thinking and argumentation and logical fallacies. And that's when I realized that, you know what, I don't have good reasons for those beliefs either.
I see.
And so that's kind of what led me to atheism.
So on a docking scale, where would you put yourself from a 1 to 7?
So 7 is the position that no God exists.
That's like the Hitchens, like that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I consider myself to be agnostic. I call myself an agnostic atheist. And the reason I call myself that is because I don't claim to know whether a God exists or not. You know, I don't say I know a God exists. I don't say I don't know.
That's reasonable.
Because I don't think that knowledge is really
obtainable.
Yeah. Okay. I think this is why people have beliefs. I don't actually believe that there is a God. I don't feel like I have a good reason to believe that there is one, knowing what I know now.
Okay. And a couple other just background questions before we get into the meat and taters of this. But how long have you been associated with Tang, the Atheist Roundtable? I asked Oz, one of the questions for Oz is, why are you naming your shows after food? because first you had tart, which just makes me want to eat the food, it makes me want to eat the show. But second one is tang, which is like that drink, right? So
Yeah,
how long
it's a recurring theme.
how long have you been associated with that organization, and how long have you been hosting yourself?
I met Oz, and at the time it was Oz and Pasta Mike, and they both saw me on the EA show, which used to be the Empathetic Atheist show, with my co-host at the time, Justin, who is Khalil Allah now. And so I had been doing that show for about a year, maybe a little less than a year. And, I kind of got noticed by Pasta Mike and Oz, who were doing Tart at the time. Somewhere around, I don't know, I'm really bad with memory and dates and times, but it was maybe 4 or 5 months ago, about halfway through my tenure over there. But so they liked enough of what I had to say that they decided to send me some gear and a proper camera and a microphone just so that I could have a better presentation that I'm still working on. But and so yeah, I started watching their show at the same time I was hosting the EA show. And then when my tenure at the EA show ended, they kind of invited me, or Oz invited me, a position over at Tang, which was the new umbrella network that he was creating. So I would say since the inception of Tang, which is new.
How new?
A couple months.
Okay.
I've done 6 shows. I've had 6 episodes over there.
So how long did you do the Empathetic Atheist show for? You said 1 year?
Yeah, it was about a year, I think.
And how is it like to see your former co-host convert? Was that like, how was that like?
Well, seeing for me and some of the other producers of that show, because a lot of us left at the same time, it wasn't a sudden thing for us the way that it was for some of the viewers. I'm aware that it came off as sudden in appearance to a lot of the people who were watching, but for us, it was something that we kind of suspected for a while. And so it wasn't a huge shock when it happened. I think maybe the announcement of when he decided to announce it was kind of the shocking aspect of it, but the fact that he converted wasn't really that surprising. It seemed to be on the horizon as far as we could tell. Yeah. And but the reasons we left had more to do with kind of the creative difference of the direction that the show should take, after he came out. After
I was going to say that's kind of if someone's now a Muslim, like where do you even begin to process that one? It's not like well, I apparently I just looked right now. Apparently he's revamped it himself, saying he's a Muslim now, which is kind of weird because you think you'd either just maybe start another channel or something, but that's it.
Well, but he's maintained the show and he's rebranded it, examining arguments. I see that. So and it's a new it's basically a new platform for him. I mean, it's the same platform, but it's rebranded. He's got new people on there. The theme is different, and he has a lot more subscribers now than he did before. So it seems to be working for him, so
that's interesting. Do you follow many atheist people online, like Aaron Ra or Dylan Hunte or Trump, whatever his name is? Trump.
Yeah, I'm familiar with all of these people. I've spoken to all of them in various forums, but and I would say that I'm familiar with them, and every now and then I'll see a video that they're doing, but I don't follow them regularly. I mean, there's so many people out there kind of doing their own thing, and I'm involved with a couple of different projects now, so I don't really have time to follow everyone.
Oh, okay. I got a funny picture I want to show you. I look just like that Khaled guy right there. See that? Got to be in a cave in Israel. So 2013, I was living with my girlfriend in Greece. And yeah, so I took a month-long trip to Israel. Well, I was traveling around for like 2 months, but I went to like Macedonia and like Kosovo and everything, and then I jumped over to Israel for like a month, and I was really interested in Islam. So I had that big old turban and big old beard. And I was able to sneak past the guards and get into the Dome of the Rock, which like you got to be Muslim to get into there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was able to get into there.
I imagine that you could pass with a long beard and a turban on.
Well, the funny thing is I had a yarmulke at first, and I tried to get into there. And they're like, oh, you got to be Muslim to get here. I'm like, yeah, I'm Muslim. They're like, oh, recite the Quran. And I was like, okay. So I went away. I put the turban on, and I'm like, La ilaha Muhammad Rasul. And I went in. The guy was like,
Assalamu alaikum. That's
yeah. The guy was like, that guy was like, did that just happen? Like, and so I hurried up and I went down there, and then he eventually came and found me. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, interesting enough though, because my parents are ministers, and I was right. Like I could see the Via Dolorosa. I was like on the Via Dolorosa where they say Jesus was crucified, and I was like, whatever. I just turned and walked the other way. So I was as non-Christian as you could get. You know, I was getting tattoos there, smoking weed, drinking, and I would never have imagined 4 months later I would have had a conversion, a religious conversion. But I do understand that the conversion and deconversion process, it's a story, you know. There's no like straight line. It's sometimes curvy, sometimes backwards, sometimes forward. And
yeah, the journeys are as unique as the personalities of individuals are unique, you know, and the experiences that people have. So there's no model of deconversion or conversion. It varies depending on the person, the circumstances, the situation they're in, their pre-established worldviews, and many other factors.
Yeah, I think that is a valid criticism that I've heard, that some atheists say, well, there's pretty much just as many versions of God as there are Christians, because people say they believe in a personal savior. And I
would say that there's as many gods as there are people, you know, as there are theists. So it's because there's Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism. There's all the offshoot branches, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, you know, it's like all of them.
I'm going to break this up with some lightning quick rounds. I'm going to ask both of you guys to answer these as fast as possible. So I want you to tell me your favorite 70s era band, 80s era, 90s era, and 2000, and then nothing past 2000, because that's just all garbage. So,
that's hard. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that is a hard one.
70s.
I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 70s.
Touche.
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay.
70s. Okay, I'm probably gonna have to go with Kansas. Okay, 80s, Duran. That's like no brainer. 90s, it's my favorite band of all time, which is Nirvana. And 2000s, I would say Korn, because they're from my hometown of Bakersfield. So I don't really count anything past that as music. So, Darrington?
I'm gonna say Weird Al Yankovic and Tenacious D, and what's another?
80s. Who's 80s?
What's a funny band from the 80s? Metallica. They're funny,
okay,
right?
What about you, Bryce?
I mean, can I do ties?
Yeah.
So for 70s, I would say Jackson 5 and
Queen. Go figure.
Yeah, so it's probably a cross between Jackson 5 or Queen, because I'm a fan of both of them. For 80s, I would say Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses.
Nice. Hair band.
Yeah, and for 90s, Red Hot Chili Peppers.
There you go. Actually, it's a funny story. When I had hair, I was so obsessed with Michael Jackson. Actually, Jerry curled my hair. And then in the 90s, I got into hip hop. So I used to braid it and stuff. So that's many moons ago. All right. So next one is who is your favorite horror character of all time?
What kind of character?
Horror genre.
Horror.
And don't say Yahweh. Don't say Yahweh. That's Yahweh's off limits. He killed the most people.
Does the alien count?
Sure.
I would probably say the xenomorph from Alien. I think that's just a fantastic design. It scared me when I was a kid, and I thought it was really cool.
Hey, D, did I tell you the story? So Sigourney Weaver was on the flight with my girlfriend, and she signed like the welcome sign ad for. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, you didn't tell that story.
Oh
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
I had a girlfriend once before I got married.
Once.
Yeah.
Nice.
What about GD?
I'm going to take the Predator approach and
Predator.
spar with my fellow atheists by saying that the Predator is a better horror monster.
He would have been my second choice, just for the record.
I'm gonna go with Chucky because I remember seeing that and I literally crying as a kid because I got so scared by it. Okay, last one. If you could live in any video game, what would it be, Bryce?
Video game, probably Super Mario World, because I want to ride a Yoshi with wings.
D?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Star Wars?
Anything involving space.
Star Wars. I would say Star Wars.
Kerbal Space Program. I would love to be a Kerbal.
All right. Well, we want to get into the meat of what we're talking about here, Bryce. So we're going to rotate back and forth questions with me and Darrington. So just please answer. Oh, by the way, before we get started, you'd actually, I didn't catch this at the time, but you'd actually wanted to ask me a question. You said you'd want to ask me a question as soon as I got off.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't recall. Like I said, I have bad memory, so.
You don't have to ask it, but it was about affirming, whether or not it was affirming.
Yeah, I don't remember. If it comes to me, then I'll.
No, I said that was the question. You said, how do I hold to being affirming and being a believer, something like that?
I don't recall that, but if you have any, I mean, you can answer the question.
Well, I've told Darrington I don't really have a very popular position because it's like I can't really appease either side because I do tend to be more liberal in my politics.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, I mean, I do think the liberals have gone overboard in some areas, but the liberals want me to say, oh, this is like they want me to be affirming and they want me to say this is okay and that's not sin or whatever. And then the conservatives will get upset that I don't think that I believe hate speech should be illegal, and I also believe in gay rights and so on. So I kind of just have like an in between the line position that neither side is happy with me. So it's kind of a hard situation to be in, you know?
I don't think that there are two sides. I think that there are many sides. And because my position would be in between, like I would say that I don't think hate speech should be illegal. Mm-hmm. But I do think gay rights should be, I think that LGBT people should have rights, but I don't think hate speech. So which side am I on? You know, it's like there's a lot of different in between positions.
Exactly.
There. So.
Exactly. So anyway, does that make sense to you? Probably.
It does. I mean, that would. We could almost have an entire discussion about that some other time. Maybe when you come on my show, we'll talk. Right. We'll dig deeper.
Darrington and I have discussed a little bit about this. We wanted to dig a little bit deeper, hopefully in the trans issue. So we were trying to line up a trans guest because I grew up with BID, which is body identity integrity disorder, and it's what people have whenever they want to amputate some kind of limb or some part of themselves, and it's actually what transsexuals suffer from. So growing up with sexual confusion and stuff like that, I was ridiculed pretty harshly for being a homosexual, and I wasn't. I was just like genuinely confused. I mean, I was like metrosexual. So when you grow up like that and you know what it's like to be ridiculed and you know what it's like to be belittled, then it makes you naturally more empathetic towards people like that, you know? So yeah, I have a lot of.
You would hope so, yeah.
No, it has for me. Anyway, so that being said, first question I have for you is, why do you think it's necessary to have a show and voice yourself the way that you're doing, or other atheists doing so?
Assuming that's directed to me, I think.
Yeah, these are all going to be for you. I don't care what Darrington's just here for moral support.
Right.
It's like an AA meeting.
I'm here to smack him down when he misbehaves.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So why do I do what I do is your question, right? I don't know that it's necessary. It's just something I enjoy doing. It's something that I feel like I can speak confidently about based on my own experiences. And, you know, I feel like one of the arguments that I hear a lot about atheism is that, you know, you don't really have how can you have a purpose or a meaning without God, you know? And I think that this is just kind of one of those ways of me creating my own purpose,
Okay.
you know?
Okay,
And I think that my main goal is I want people to be able to think critically, you know, and make sure that they understand the value of empiricism, rationalism, logic, you know, all of these things whenever they're forming their beliefs. And I find that a lot of people, mostly people who are religious, but sometimes people who are not religious, don't do that. And, you know, so wherever they end up after doing that, whatever their beliefs are after they understand rational arguments and their reasons for believing, then that's fine. But I want to get more people to engage on that. I really think critical thinking is something that should be taught in grade school. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have it. But I think that the thing I'm against mostly is indoctrination. I don't like people just believing something because they've been taught to believe it. I would prefer that people actually think about, you know, have some sort of epistemological foundation for their beliefs, you know, instead of just following something because it's been popular or taught. Or because there's like, they have fear or there's threats of punishment or rewards or things like that. You know, I don't think that these are good reasons to have beliefs. So that's kind of why I do what I do. I want to learn what other people believe, why they believe it, that sort of thing.
So Darrington and I very frequently disagree about stuff, but the thing that I love about Darrington, apart from his consistent bounce in his hair, is that he has a very logical and rational way of coming to his agreements. And at the end of the day, I think he's wrong in a lot of things. That's just my opinion. But I respect his tenacity in getting to where he's drawn those conclusions. So for that, I have a lot of respect for him. And I've told him, and I told you on the Collins show yesterday, I actually see people like you as allies more than anything, because the Trumpsters and stuff, that the trumpets, when I disagree with them online, they attack me very low personally, you know. And I've been able to have a lot of discussions with atheists, and they don't do that. You know, I've had now 5 atheist co-hosts. So speaking of co-hosts, over to you, D.
Yeah, I do want to bring that up because that's sort of why we exist, right? Is we need to be able to have conversations and treat each other with love and respect, humility and empathy, right? and we're often distracted by this question of whether or not we're attacking each other or we're attacking ideas. And I'm curious what you think, Bryce, if how best to go about having discussions with people while making sure that we're all talking about ideas and not necessarily each other.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, I guess first I would say that the most important thing to do is actually listen to the arguments that people are making and not straw manning them. Because a lot of times we end up talking past each other or responding in emotion and getting the person's argument wrong or misrepresenting them. So that's the first thing. And then also, like for me, recognizing that I used to be a theist, I used to be a Christian, and when I certainly believed myself to be as intelligent and as reasonable and as moral as I do now, you know, and I was never a bad person because I believed something differently. For me, that's the importance of not using ad hominem and recognizing that in and of itself is a fallacy. That arguments are distinct from the character of the person making the argument. So there's no reason to attack their argument. Their argument will stand on its own or it will fall on its own. And also, you know, atheists attacking my character when I was a Christian that wouldn't convince me that I had irrational beliefs or poor arguments. It actually took rational arguments and an understanding of critical thinking for me to get to where I am now. So if I had atheists just telling me that I was stupid or, you know, attacking my character, that wouldn't have done anything for me.
I really appreciate that point there. I really, really do. That might be, it might be one of the best things that I've heard on this podcast. Definitely definitely anything better that Darrington has said so far.
Well, okay. Let me attempt to balance those bars then. You know, because oftentimes when you attack an idea that's very personal to that person, like you know, for instance, if I believed in God, that's a very personal thing, that an idea that's very difficult to detach from me. And what I found as an atheist is oftentimes when I make comments about the character of God or the existence of God, the response is as if I had insulted them personally. And I struggle with that because I don't want to come across as attacking them personally. Mainly, I mean, partially because of what you described. It's a terrible tactic. If you're actually trying to have conversation.
So okay. So first of all, so I have two questions to ask you real quick. First of all, so ad hominem attacks usually are directed at the other person, right? But is it an ad hominem attack if you attack like the person's mom? Like if you were to say in the middle of a debate, your mom's so fat that small objects orbit her, like does that still count?
It would depend on.
Okay, no, this one actually is a serious question.
Okay, let me finish his sentence real quick though, because this is important. It depends on the subject of the debate. If the subject of the debate is the existence of the other person's mom, yes, it is a perfectly valid argument, right? It may not sound very politically savvy, but it's that's not an ad hominem if that's the subject.
All right. So, okay, how about this one, Bryce? So, are you familiar that there's atheists who pose as Satanists and they don't really believe in Satan? I guess they just do it to piss Christians off, but they call themselves Satanists.
Well, actually, my understanding of Satanism, like the Church of Satan, for instance, is an atheistic organization. That's the official doctrine, if you want to call it that. They are atheists, so it's not that they're posing as Satanists. That's actually what Satanism is for most Satanists. There's a subset of Satanists that are theists who actually believe in a literal Satan and worship Satan. But the majority of, like the Church of Satan, it's an atheistic movement, and so the reason they're calling themselves the Church of Satan is really just to kind of get a dig in at Christians who think that Satan is real.
And I was going to say, does that not also like allow them to get like tax to like not have to pay taxes or something?
There may be a little bit
genius.
It is really. I'm not sure if that is necessarily the case with that organization, but it would be. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I don't know. I haven't done a lot of digging on the Church of Satan. I learned that actually when I was a Christian, because I mistakenly assumed that they actually believed in Satan, and I didn't understand how that made sense. But
here's my problem with atheists too, because atheists want to say they don't have beliefs, or at least a lot of them that I've met on this thing. But if you're a Satanist, you're gonna say, okay, I'm not a Satanist, or I'm a communist, but I don't believe in communism. Or I'm a capitalist, but I don't believe in capitalism. But if you call yourself an atheist and you don't believe in atheism, then how could you be an atheist? Like, do you believe in atheism or not?
I believe in many things.
But you believe in atheism. I think the question is atheism.
Atheism? No, I don't know what that is.
It's a joke.
Theism.
It's my
I get it.
It's my attempt at humor because you just got punked. Okay, now onto serious joke. Okay. So what is the number one tool? And I couldn't see your face last night, but it seemed like you got really annoyed when I told you not to answer this question. Like you seemed really annoyed, but what's the number one tool that you use as a skeptic? And what would be your advice for people who just to be more skeptical. Because I'm a Christian, I'm skeptical. I'm probably just as, if not more, skeptical as you two. So, what are your thoughts on that?
My number one tool as a skeptic, that's interesting the way you put it, because I usually describe skepticism as a tool, but I would say, first of all, I would say my brain, I would say just not being afraid to ask questions, basic philosophy, challenging my own beliefs, challenging the epistemic foundation for my beliefs, asking myself, what do I know? How do I know it? How can I test this to see if it's true? Whether my beliefs conform to reason, whether they're supported by evidence, whether they are consistent with rationalism, learning about science, and the scientific methods that's based on skepticism too. So really just asking questions and admitting that you don't know everything, not being afraid to admit when you don't know, instead of making up an answer. So that's the most important thing to me as a skeptic.
So guys, let me jump in here. The Socratic Method, like seriously, it's like the best tool ever. If you think you have an idea, you think you believe in it, just ask yourself, what if I believe the opposite? And play it out. It's super easy, and it's a really amazing tool for skepticism.
Yeah, and a lot of times people think of the Socratic Method when they're talking to another person or trying to get the person they're debating with or having a discussion with to see things along the same lines. You don't normally think of it in application to yourself, but I suppose you could have internal dialogue with asking yourself questions and trying to answer the questions. So
yeah. So this is the problem. I'm edited out, but you did actually interrupt me one time, and I told you that's like, there's just a couple of rules that we have. And
I did that?
Yeah, yes, it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine. Darrington's interrupted me before too. So
only once. The time.
He only did it once, except for now. I guess
we agreed earlier. My job was to slap you down when you're misbehaving. So that implies interrupting you.
Yeah. So no, but seriously though, the real point of that though, Bryce, is because if you were to interrupt someone, you are implicitly saying two things. One, I'm not really paying attention to what you're saying. And the second thing is that what I think is more important than what you're saying. And so for me, having the empathy is that I don't want someone to just automatically come out and reject what I've said. Okay. And I know you probably heard a little bit about my story, Bryce, is that like I had a revelation, Jesus Christ spoke to me. I mean, I was 4 months after leaving Israel, and you're smoking weed and getting all kinds of paganism tattoos on me. I had a situation where Jesus Christ spoke to me, and it changed my life for the better. But it's a pretty crazy, and I get that. And I wouldn't believe me if I wasn't me. If I had not experienced it, I would think that I was totally nuts, and my whole family has thought that I've been nuts. So essentially, I want to afford people the same opportunity, whether or not they're telling me about atheism or their religion. I want to hear people out. And that's why we have people from a variety of backgrounds on the show. And so, for me, I don't want to, and I do interrupt people sometimes. Sometimes it's with delay. Sometimes I think that they're done. And I always apologize. Say, I'm sorry, I thought you were done. Please finish. Because the problem is that another one of my atheist hosts put it very brilliantly. He said, you got to hold the person's thought in your mind, okay, rather than just going one ear and out the other. Because if you can do that, at least you could try to understand why someone believes what they do. And the empathy for me is that I 1 gazillion% believe, had I experienced what you experienced, or Darrington, like I would believe what you believe. Had I not had my experiences, I would still be an atheist. So that being said, I want to ask you another question. Are you personally open to the idea that atheism is not only wrong, but it's actually a bad idea?
It depends on what you mean by atheism. And, we talked about it a little bit. My position is that atheism is not believing in a God, right? But really it's just a label, and it can be applied in different ways. There are subsets of atheism. People define it differently. There's strong atheism, where some people say that no God exists. There's Gnostic atheism, where people claim to know that there's no God. There's anti-theism, which is, yeah, exactly. So it really depends on which position is held by the atheists and how they're reasoning their position, what they're advocating for, whether they're using bad arguments or good arguments. So my first thing would be to make sure that they understand what atheism is as I'm using it before they make that argument, or at least have them define what atheism means as they are using it, so that we can get on the same page, you know? So I would say it depends. My particular version of atheism, which I identified as agnostic atheist, if you're saying that I'm wrong or that it's a bad idea, I'm open to whatever arguments that someone could make. But first of all, my position is my position. So I don't know. I mean, it's correct in the sense that it's a position I actually hold. If you're saying that I shouldn't hold it, or I ought to hold a different position, I'm open to that, but that would require actually making an argument for why, you know? So I'm always open to arguments, but I'm not just going to accept that my position ought to be different without an argument.
Right.
If that makes sense.
So you're open. Okay. So I don't know, that one of the funniest things is just hearing the wide range of people's justification for being atheist. There's so many different labels, you know, like, I mean, generally speaking, I thought there was just, okay, there's just an atheist. But then I've heard one of my guests describe himself as a lowercase atheist. And I guess that might be what you call a soft atheist, or you used another word. What was the other? I've never heard the one you used.
So there's strong atheism, weak atheism, Gnostic atheism.
Yeah. So and then Darrington is what I consider as an extremist. He's an extremist in the group, because he's like, yeah, God doesn't exist, and if he does exist, I'm going after him. So Darrington has a kind of unique position. I never really heard someone express that before. But
I want to speak to that, because, like, you know, to me, atheism is, again, just I'm not convinced of the existence of the supernatural as presented by theism. But then the anti-theist takes it one step further and says that, you know, that actually faith as a virtue is anathema to our progress as a species. So, you know, yeah, I actively work against religious-based thinking. And, you know, to take that even one step further, if you were to, like, God were to appear before me and provide demonstrable evidence, you know, all this stuff that the God of Abraham is real, I would have a real problem with him. I think that character has some flaws that we need to seriously discuss. And that's a hard conversation to have, you know.
And I don't disagree with anything you said there. I probably hold the identical positions. I tend not to describe myself as an anti-theist, because sometimes people interpret that to mean you're actively working to destroy religion or to put down other people's beliefs or things like that. And that's not really what I'm about. I think that people believe what they do, and you know, that people are entitled to have whatever beliefs that they have. It's not for me to say that you're believing something wrong unless I can prove it, you know? And so because of that burden of proof there, I can't prove to someone that the God they're believing in doesn't exist unless I know everything about the claims that they're making, which usually I find I don't. So I just kind of take an agnostic stance and listen to their arguments.
I mean, I guess, how do you respond to that in a world where they're using those beliefs and arguments to enforce laws, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's not just a academic discussion. There is real world consequences going on. So how do you gel those two factors, right?
Well, I mean, I separate it along the lines of what what people actually do. I don't judge people based on what they believe. I judge them based on what they do. And so if there are theists and Christians and Muslim, whatever religious, background they're coming from, who are actively working to curtail my rights through legislation or other means, yeah, I'm going to fight against that. But I can make a distinction between those theists and other theists who are not doing that. I talked to Isaiah about this a little while ago, where we have Christians who are on the right, but there's also Christians who are on the left, and so they're actually voting against each other. So if you're using Jesus to tell you that gay people should have equal rights, I'm all for that. If you're using Jesus to say that gay people should have no rights, I'm against that. So I'm going to look at it by the individual actions that they're doing.
Right. And so, as I've said in the past, I see you guys more as like allies, or maybe like not really an ally, but kind of like an armistice with you guys. We got an armistice temporarily, because that's a joke. But because I just generally at this stage of my life, from having experienced so many different cultures and people, like I just don't see people as enemies, like one way or the other. Like I see someone who I maybe disagree with as a potential friend, as a potential brother in the future. So I don't debate people online. I've been an atheist before myself. And I would like to see with my channel, people humanizing each other, both sides, because I have a problem when Christians dehumanize atheists. Like we have a lot of actually pretty funny atheist jokes that a lot of pastors use in sermons. And if you see movies like God's Not Dead, and you see the atheist guy in there, he's like a jerk. He's a bully. He's very arrogant.
He's a straw man made of straw men.
yeah. So it's pretty bad. And then on the other side, I also see atheists doing the same things as Christians, and I understand to a big extent, because even as a Christian, I'm like, God, if you guys are saying stuff like the Earth is 6,000 years old, like we're gonna just look so stupid, like, you know what I mean? Like we are just gonna get eviscerated, and then what's gonna happen is scientists are going to come along and disprove this, and they're going to think that they've disproved the Bible, So for me, it's like we got to make good arguments. We got to make sound arguments. Otherwise, people are going to destroy those arguments and then think that they don't need to believe in God anymore. So I am familiar with the lines of reasoning and logic, logical fallacies, and I've traveled, I've experienced, educated. So being able to give, I don't have the answer to every question, but I say that very frequently. I don't know a lot of. Darren, how many times have I said I don't know? You probably don't know it yourself. Yeah, it's like it's true. It's genuinely true.
That's one thing that I appreciate about these types of conversations. Like, but
I would just to piggyback on that. I don't assume that because someone is a Christian, they're going to be a young earth creationist. Like I'm aware that there are divides there. When I was a Christian, I wasn't a young earth creationist, because that's actually not even in the Bible.
Right.
That's something that James Ussher came up with through genealogical counting, and then that became adopted by a lot of the churches and taught as doctrine. So some Christians are going to believe that, others aren't. But if they're making those arguments, then I will go after those arguments and tell them why I think that's an unreasonable belief. But I don't try to paint all Christians as having that belief.
So I do believe in the Big Bang, and I do believe in evolution. And the thing about with Adam and Eve, and I do believe in a literal Adam and Eve. What I do believe, though, is that there's a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes. Like I do believe in the book of Enoch, which has been accepted by some traditional sects inside of Christianity and Judaism, which that gives a whole other background to some stuff that's going on in the book of Genesis. So I do believe that I have a little bit of an unorthodox position, because I do accept that maybe there were gods like Hercules or Anubis or some kind of half-breed gods, kind of like the ancient aliens premise. But I mean, for me, they just would be like spiritual beings that the Bible says they married with women, or they had sex with women, they produced some kind of offsprings, and those kind of offsprings, to me, I think they could have appeared as God to people. So I do have a little bit of unorthodox beliefs in that sense. But I got one last question for you. We got time for one more. How do you personally escape the echo chamber of atheism? And the echo chamber, one person says it and then they repeat it, because atheists criticize Christians for being like brainwashed or closed-minded, but I think they're equally as capable of engaging the same kind of groupthink. Do you agree with that, one? And then two, how do you escape the echo chamber?
Yeah, so I do agree with that. And I think maybe the best thing to do is to recognize that atheism is not really a philosophy in the sense that a lot of people think it is. You know, it's not a dogma, it's not a creed. There's no set of beliefs or behaviors or practices with atheism. It's just not believing in a God, right? So atheists have all different ideologies and backgrounds and political leanings and positions on morality, just like theists do. So recognizing the reasons why another atheist might be an atheist instead of a Christian is a good thing. Listening to whether or not they're making rational arguments or not, correcting some of their misconceptions or assumptions, just like I would a theist.
Okay, good.
I don't like it when atheists make bad arguments, just like because that confuses theists. It would have confused me when I was a theist. And so when I hear an atheist making a really bad argument for why God doesn't exist, usually I go after that. Like the moral argument, I consider to be a bad argument for why God doesn't exist, because the moral argument doesn't get you to a God or a lack of God. It maybe says that the statements made about God from this particular book cannot be accurate, but that doesn't prove that there's no God. Because what if there's an evil God? Then your moral argument doesn't work. You know?
I've tried to explain this to Darrington multiple times. He doesn't seem to get it, but I'm sorry.
I think when any time your stance is that a God exists, there is this question of whether or not that God is definable, right? Because if you can't define God, if you just want to say that God is the universe and it's love and whatever, like who cares?
Pantheists.
It's benign, right? It doesn't affect our universe. You can't tell me what, kind of partner I can have a sexual relationship, or what, kind of life choices that I can make based off of that God. So when somebody's presenting a God, they better have a specific case. And most of the time in the Abrahamic traditions, it's one of three, right? The three big ones, and they are very specific. So if you're going to say God is all loving and all great, and he's this personal fatherly figure that loves you, okay, let's go through the accounting, because we got to make that gel.
Right. And I agree with that. And I do think that the moral arguments can be used against most of the presentations of Christianity that I've heard, or Islam, or specific God claims where people say God is all good, God is all loving. Right. Well, we should be able to test that by looking at, juxtaposing that with the actions that you're saying God did. But if you're proposing a deist God who just created and watches and does nothing, or created and moved on, okay, the moral argument doesn't work for that. There could still be a deist God, but I'm not a deist either.
But that doesn't have an impact on the real world, right? A deist God is like a Lovecraftian horror. It just exists out there, and we really doesn't care whether we worship it or not. Doesn't care what our decisions are, and it's completely benign.
So that being said, if you would like to come back and just specifically talk about the moral issue, that would be interesting, because maybe what we'll do is we'll ask Shane the Skeptic to also come on. So maybe we could do like a four-way, and because that's an interesting situation there, because I don't think it has any easy solution either side, honestly. And Shane the Skeptic was debating a T Trump about that, and so if you guys are debating it and we're debating it amongst ourselves as the Christians, that clearly does not have an easy answer. You know what I mean? So it would be interesting. It would be interesting to discuss it. I don't think we're going to answer any one question on any podcast, but what we try to do is we try to move the goalpost just maybe 1 foot in every time that we talk. And, if we're 60 yards away and we keep moving it in inch by inch, then it gets us in range to score. And along the way, we get to learn stuff from each other. We get to examine our own beliefs, which I think is extremely helpful, because if you just, if as a Christian, I just say, what I believe is right, everything you believe is wrong, I'm going to be really close-minded, and it's going to close me off to a lot of beautiful things in the world. Like, as a Christian, I've learned a lot from Muslims. I've learned a lot from Jews. I've learned from homosexuals. I've learned from transsexuals. I've learned from homeless people, beggars, kids. So, I think we just need to have respect, empathy, and Darrington. I never say love, but thank you for mentioning that one today, Darrington. Love. I think that goes a long way. So, that being said, Bryce, I really want to thank you for joining us today. Darrington, you're tenacious as always, and we want to thank you for joining us today. Please be sure to subscribe and drop us a comment below, see what you'd want to discuss next. And yeah, thank you. We look forward to seeing you back again. Goodbye.